Hi, I'm Konstantin Baum, Master of Wine, and today I'm going to drink the wine Jesus had during the Last Supper. I mean, no, I did not find the Holy Grail and it still had 2,000-year-old wine in it, but I'm going to dig deep into the history of wine in order to find the recipe for the most famous wine ever consumed. Let's dig. One of the most fascinating aspects of wine is that it's so deeply intertwined into our culture. A very important reason for that is its immensely strong relationship with Christianity. The word wine is mentioned more than 200 times in the Bible, and no other plant is mentioned as often as the vine in the Bible. Even God was described as a vintner, carefully looking after his vines in order to make sure that they carry the best fruit. The first thing Noah did after stranding with his ark was to plant a vineyard, and he was also the first person to get drunk from wine. According to the Bible, at least. Arguably, the most important person when it comes to spreading the interest in wine was not Hugh Johnson, Robert Parker, or Jancis Robinson. It was Jesus. Jesus' coming out party as the Savior, and the first miracle he ever performed was when he turned water into wine at a wedding in the village of Cana. At the Last Supper, Jesus decided to hold a vessel filled with wine that later became the Holy Grail, and he said, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood." With this, he created one of the most important rituals in the world and a reason for religious people to plant vines wherever they went in order to celebrate the Eucharist. But even if there are lots of references to wine, there's very little information in the Bible on what this wine actually tasted like. So let's find out. But before I dive deeper into the history of wine, if you want to learn more about wine, then please do subscribe to this channel. The button is down there. It's super easy. That's it. At the time when Jesus lived, wine was already widely available. The first traces of wine production date back to 6000 BC, so wine was by no means a recent invention. Back then, the Romans ruled large parts of Europe, Western Asia and Northern Africa, and they took the wine wherever they went. They even imported and exported wines from the different regions, and maybe Jesus even had access to the most famous wine of the time, the Falernian. The Falernian was a deep amber-colored white wine that was from the region of Campania and was pretty alcoholic apparently, but it's rather unlikely that a poor carpenter's son would have been able to afford this wine. The Roman scholar Pliny the Elder, who lived roughly during the same time as Jesus, was one of the first wine experts ever. He had written about the quality of wine, had written about dry and sweet wines, and even described what we would call terroir by analyzing the quality of different vineyard sites. His approach to rating wines in vineyards was pretty close to what we do today, suggesting that the wines might have been fairly similar to our wines. But he spent most of his time in Italy while Jesus lived in today's Israel. So what were the wines in the Holy Land like? Archaeological evidence from Israel suggests that wine was also fermented grape juice back then, but people added things in order to flavor it. Things like pepper, honey, resin, or herbs and other fruit even. A Polish team of researchers followed Roman winemaking practices in order to make a wine that should taste similar to a wine from Jesus' time. They added pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, and honey, and they concluded that the wine was sweet and intense, and they actually had to add water in order to fully enjoy it. To me, this sounds more like malt wine than what we would call wine today, but anyways. While it was pretty common amongst Romans to dilute their wines, it's not so clear whether Jesus would have done it. There's quite a lot of evidence suggesting that Jews would have frowned upon it, also in the Bible, talking about the city of Jerusalem. See how the faithful city has become a prostitute. She once was full of justice, righteousness used to dwell in her, but now murderous. Your silver has become dross, your best wine diluted with water. According to Dr. Patrick McGovern, a leading expert on ancient wines, the people of Jerusalem liked rich and concentrated wines. They found a jar labeled wine made from black raisins, suggesting that the wine was made in a similar style to Amarone, but they also found jars labeled smoked wines and very dark wine, suggesting that there were different categories of wines. We don't know for sure whether Jesus had white or red wine. Both wine styles were available back then. But this metaphor with blood and so on really just works with red wine. So what was the wine at the Last Supper like? It was probably red, it was probably spiced and sweet. It was probably faulty because people just didn't have the equipment back then to make great, flawless wines. And it was probably not the best wine from the region because of Jesus' standard of living. I don't think he would have had one of those Amarone style wines just because they must have been quite expensive to make back then. And he probably just had the basic option. All right, let's do this. I was thinking about which wine to pick. And first I thought I might use a wine from Israel, but I decided that probably would be too good. So I'm using this wine that I made myself in my basement, not using any additives. So it would be fairly similar to what people would have made back then. I got some flavors here. I got cardamom, I got black pepper, I got cinnamon and honey. And I got this vessel, which looks a little bit like an amphora. So I'm going to mix it all up in here. And then we're going to see whether I'm going to survive this. I have no idea how they did it back then, but I'm just going to grind up a little bit of those spices just to make them more easy to extract from the wine. Oh, cinnamon sticks are hard. Why? So I don't really know how they would have done it back then, but I'm just going to grind this up a little bit to make it more easy to extract the flavor. It's beginning to smell a lot like Christmas. Oh, wow. And I'm just going to throw this in and pour the wine on top. And yes, I've used this as a spittoon before. Not to forget the honey. Is that enough? I don't know. While the wine sits here, let's talk about drinking vessels. The Holy Grail became legendary over the centuries, but it's not really clear what the term actually means. There's even this theory suggesting that it means sang real, royal blood, and if you've read Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, you know all about it. Hundreds of vessels are believed to be the Holy Grail, but no one will ever really know. What is really clear is that Jesus did not use glass, as glassmaking was still in its infancy at that time, and there were no wine glasses available. Most likely it would have been a flat bowl, looking more like a soup bowl like this, made from clay or stone, and it probably wouldn't have enhanced the flavor of the wine. And there were certainly no varietal specific bowls back then. I believe. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm pretty sure. Looking at pictures of old Roman drinking vessels, this was the closest I could get. The shape is pretty much spot on, but the material is not quite the same as the one Jesus had. But now let's taste this stuff. In order to get all of the small pieces out of the wine, I'm just pouring it through this sieve, which is made of stainless steel, so it shouldn't impact the flavor of the wine. And here we have a nice cup of wine. Looking at this, I already find this quite funny. I mean, never had a wine from a cup like this, from a bowl like this, but now let's taste it. It smells pretty good. It does smell like Christmas. It smells like mulled wine. It smells like cardamom, pepper, well, cinnamon, the flavors that I've added. It's not bad. And the fruit flavor is also there. Let's taste it. It's quite a bit less sweet than I would have expected it to be. It smells like mulled wine, but it tastes more like a dry red wine. It's really dry. Obviously, I don't know for sure what the exact recipe would have been. This is kind of dry. The honey, I should have added a little bit more honey probably. Not bad. It definitely tastes better than I would have expected it to taste. It's quite a wild, rough expression, and the flavor of the spices adds another dimension to the wine. I mean, you often find cinnamon and pepper notes in a wine, and here you can actually base that on the fact that you added those spices to the wine. It's not bad. It does not make me feel holy, if that's what you're thinking about. Definitely doesn't. But it didn't kill me. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of wine, then please like this video down here. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question of the day is, what other historic wines should I try to recreate here on this channel? Let me know down below. I hope I see you guys again soon. Until then, stay thirsty.